The force binds all things across the galaxy, connecting every living being in an invisible web of energy and destiny. But what happens when something crashes into this ancient tapestry? Something forged in a different universe entirely, powered by technology that predates even the oldest Jedi texts, worn by a warrior who has faced horrors the Sith could scarcely imagine? The desert sands of Tatooine were about to learn the answer. The impact crater stretched 100 meters across the Dune Sea, still smoking when the Jawas arrived at dawn. Their sandcrawler ground to a halt at the ridge, rust-colored robes flapping in the hot wind as they chattered excitedly in their incomprehensible dialect. Through electrobinoculars, they could see the wreckage, a ship unlike anything in their considerable experience salvaging crashed vessels. Not Imperial, not Rebellion, not even recognizable as technology from the known galaxy. The hull gleamed orange and red, even through the scorch marks, its design aerodynamic and predatory, built for a single occupant, perhaps two at most. No visible weapons ports, yet something about its construction suggested violence. The eldest Jawa gestured forward. Credits awaited. The sandcrawler lurched down the dune. Inside the crater, Samus Aran's eyes opened behind her visor. Diagnostic readouts scrolled across her helmet's HUD. Suit integrity at 97%, energy reserves at 84%, and recharging, all major systems operational. The various suit had absorbed the worst of the crash, its Chozo-engineered shielding deflecting forces that would have liquefied an unprotected human body. Her gunship, however, hadn't fared as well. Through the cracked canopy, she could see structural damage throughout the cockpit, sparking conduits and a navigation array that displayed nothing but static. She'd been pursuing a space pirate frigate through the Pyanchi sector when the anomaly appeared. A tears in space-time itself, writhing with energy signatures her sensors couldn't classify. The pirates had fled through it. She'd followed. Professional instinct had overridden caution, and now she was paying the price. Samus unsealed the canopy. It hissed and groaned, hydraulics complaining, before finally releasing. Heat slammed into her like a physical wall. Her suit's environmental systems immediately compensated, cooling circuits activating to maintain comfortable internal temperature. She pulled herself from the cockpit and dropped 3 meters to the sand below, her armored boots leaving deep impressions. The landscape was hostile. Twin suns blazed overhead in a sky the color of dried blood. Endless dunes stretched in every direction, broken only by distant rock formations that shimmered in the heat haze. Her scan visor activated automatically, overlaying tactical information across her field of vision. Atmospheric composition, temperature readings, potential threats. But the planet designation came back as unknown. The star system, unknown. Her position in the galaxy, unknown. The gunship's AI spoke, its voice crackling through her helmet speakers. Navigation database contains no matching star patterns. Hyperdrive manifold compromised. Fuel converter offline. Estimated repair time without proper materials. Impossible. Samus looked up at the twin suns, then back at her crippled ship. She'd survived worse. ZBs, SR-388, FAS. But those had been missions with clear objectives and extraction plans. This was different. This was survival in a completely unknown galaxy with no support, no intel, and no way home. Movement on the ridge caught her attention. Her arm cannon swiveled smoothly, targeting systems locking onto the approaching vehicle before her conscious mind fully registered the threat. The scan visor analyzed it. Treaded transport, multiple small life forms aboard. Primitive energy weapons, classification unknown. Not space pirates, not Galactic Federation, something else entirely. The vehicle, a massive tracked fortress of rusted metal and welded scrap, descended the dune with surprising speed. Small robed figures emerged from hatches, chattering excitedly and gesturing at her ship. One approached her directly, producing a handheld device that beeped and whirred. Samus's translator protocols cycled through every known language in her database. Nothing matched. The creature, perhaps a meter tall, with glowing yellow eyes visible beneath its hood, continued speaking, occasionally pointing at her ship and then at his transport vehicle. The universal language of scavengers transcended galaxies. It wanted to salvage her gunship. Her arm cannon hummed, energy building in the charge chamber. The sound was unmistakable across any language. The Jawa froze, its device clattering to the sand. "Leave," Samus said, knowing it wouldn't understand the words but hoping the tone would suffice. "Now!" The Jawa scrambled backward, chittering frantically. Its companions began retreating toward their sandcrawler. Their excited, salvaging expedition suddenly transformed into a panicked flight. The massive vehicle's engines roared to life, belching black smoke into the desert air. Samus lowered her cannon as the sandcrawler fled, leaving deep track marks in its wake. She was alone again, stranded on a hostile desert planet in an unfamiliar galaxy, with a crippled ship and no clear path forward. But she'd learned three critical pieces of information. This world was inhabited, the inhabitants had technology, and they understood the threat of superior firepower. It was a start. She turned back to her gunship and began the damage assessment. The space pirates could wait. First, she needed to survive. Then she needed answers. And eventually, she'd find a way back to her own galaxy, even if she had to tear a hole through space-time itself to do it. The twin suns climbed higher, and in the distance, the sandcrawler disappeared beyond the dunes, its Jawa crew already spreading word through their network. Something had crashed in the Dune Sea. Something dangerous. Something wearing armor that made stormtrooper plating look like children's toys. In cantinas and spaceports across Tatooine, that rumor would travel fast. And in this galaxy, rumors about dangerous individuals attracted exactly the wrong kind of attention. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. 3 days in the desert had taught Samus more about survival than she'd expected. The twin suns were merciless, baking the sand until it glowed like molten glass. Her suit's environmental systems handled it easily, but water was another matter. She'd located a moisture farm on the second day, primitive evaporators extracting water from the atmosphere, and watched from a distance as robed humanoids tended the equipment. Human, or close enough. That was useful information. She'd avoided contact, instead focusing on her gunship's repairs. The damage was extensive but not catastrophic. Main power systems remained functional thanks to the Chozo fusion reactor, but the hyperdrive equivalent, the dimensional shift drive that had brought her here, was completely fried. Without replacement parts, or at least an understanding of this galaxy's faster-than-light technology, she was grounded indefinitely. The scan visor had been working overtime, analyzing everything within range. Local technology was crude by Chozo standards but functional. Energy weapons using compressed plasma, repulsor technology for vehicles, some kind of faster-than-light travel that left distinct radiation signatures in the upper atmosphere. Ships came and went from a settlement roughly 30 kilometers north, a spaceport judging by the traffic patterns. On the morning of the fourth day, Samus made her decision. She needed three things: information, materials, and currency. The spaceport would have all three. She sealed her gunship's emergency protocols, activating defensive systems that would vaporize anyone attempting to breach the hull. Then she began the trek north, her armored boots finding purchase on sand that would have swallowed a normal human. The various suits' servo motors made the journey effortless, and the speed booster could have covered the distance in minutes, but she maintained a steady pace. No need to advertise capabilities until necessary. The settlement materialized from the heat haze like a mirage made solid. Mos Eisley. Her scan visor picked up the designation from a corroded sign at the city limits. Mos Eisley Spaceport. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. Someone had a sense of humor, or perhaps it was simply truth in advertising. The streets were chaos. Aliens of every conceivable type crowded the narrow passages between sandstone buildings. Species her database had no classification for, speaking languages her translator couldn't parse. Wheeled droids beeped and rolled past, narrowly avoiding collision with irritated pedestrians. The smell hit her even through the suit's filters: unwashed bodies, exotic spices, engine coolant, and something organic she couldn't identify. Samus drew attention immediately. Her orange and red armor stood out against the beige and brown palette of the desert city, and her height, enhanced by the suit's bulk, made her tower over most of the crowd. Conversations died as she passed. Hands moved toward weapons. She kept her own arm cannon lowered but ready, tracking potential threats through peripheral sensors. The cantina announced itself with noise bleeding through the walls. Alien music, raised voices, the clatter of glasses. Above the entrance, a sign displayed symbols her translator finally recognized. Galactic Basic, similar enough to Federation Standard that patterns emerged. She filed that away. Language acquisition was possible. Two figures blocked the entrance. Security, judging by their posture and the heavy blaster rifles slung across their chests. One was humanoid with green skin and strange protrusions from his head. The other looked almost human but with unnatural pallor and dark, calculating eyes. "No droids," the green one said, his voice a gravelly rumble. Samus's translator caught perhaps 30% of it, enough to understand the restriction. She wasn't a droid, obviously, but the statement revealed something important. Artificial intelligence was common enough here to require exclusion from certain establishments. She moved forward. The guards exchanged glances, then the pale one stepped aside. "Your funeral, whatever you are." The cantina's interior was dimly lit, air thick with smoke from substances her suit's analyzers flagged as mildly toxic. Perfect. Anywhere this rough was where information flowed freely and questions were rarely asked. She scanned the room methodically. 43 life forms, 16 different species, 28 visible weapons, multiple exit points. The bar dominated one wall, tended by a creature with 4 arms and an impressive array of bottles behind it. Samus approached the bar, noting how conversations dropped to whispers as she passed. A Rhodian, her visor finally matched a species classification, scrambled out of her path, spilling his drink. She reached the counter and stood there, waiting. The bartender regarded her with multiple eyes, each swiveling independently. "We don't serve." He paused, clearly uncertain what she was. "What are you drinking?" Her translator was improving with each sentence, adapting to the linguistic patterns. She could respond, but that would require removing her helmet. Not an option. Instead, she accessed her suit's external speakers and played back a recording of the bartender's own voice, slightly modulated. "Information." The 4-armed creature's eyes widened. "Not a droid, then. Clever. Information costs credits, stranger." Samus had anticipated this. She reached to her belt and produced a small power cell. Chozo technology, worth more than this entire cantina if anyone knew what it was. She placed it on the bar. It hummed softly, glowing with internal energy. The bartender picked it up, turned it over, then bit it experimentally. When his teeth failed to dent the casing, respect flickered across his alien features. "What do you want to know?" "This place," Samus said through her speakers, using the bartender's voice again. "Currency. Technology. Ships. Credits for currency. Empire controls most of the galaxy. Rebellion fights them in the shadows. Ships are everywhere if you've got credits or..." He eyed her armor appreciatively. "Skills. What kind of skills you got, stranger?" Before Samus could answer, a heavy hand landed on her shoulder. "Nice armor," a voice growled behind her. "I'll take it." She turned slowly. The speaker was nearly 2 meters tall, covered in brown fur, with a face like a nightmare predator. Elongated snout, sharp teeth, and eyes that held predatory intelligence. Her scan visor finally registered a match. Species classification unavailable, but threat level, moderate. The creature's hand tightened on her shoulder plating. "Didn't you hear me? I said..." Samus moved. Her arm snapped up, cannon connecting with the creature's jaw in a strike that would have pulverized Durasteel. The alien flew backward, crashed through a table, and didn't get up. The cantina went absolutely silent. She turned back to the bartender. "Skills," she said simply. The 4-armed alien was staring at her with new appreciation. "You're a bounty hunter." It wasn't a question, but Samus nodded anyway. It was close enough to the truth, and in this galaxy, it seemed like the role that would serve her best. "Then you want Jabba's palace," the bartender said, sliding the power cell back to her. Keep that. Consider the information a professional courtesy. Jabba the Hutt runs the local underworld. Always has work for someone who can handle themselves. Head west at sunset, follow the canyon markers. Can't miss it. Samus pocketed the cell and turned to leave. Behind her, the unconscious alien began groaning. The cantina's noise slowly resumed. Conversations now focused entirely on the armored stranger who just announced her presence to Mos Eisley's criminal element. By the time she reached the street, her translator had finished processing hundreds of conversations, building a comprehensive database of galactic basic. And by the time the twin suns touched the horizon, word had spread throughout Tatooine's underworld. A new hunter had arrived, wearing armor that made Beskar look fragile, with a weapon built into her arm and combat skills that put Wookiees to shame. In the deeper reaches of the galaxy, on a star destroyer cutting through hyperspace, a report would land on an admiral's desk within hours. Unidentified armored individual, technology unknown, potentially significant threat. The report would eventually reach someone who collected information on dangerous individuals like other beings collected art. Someone with a particular interest in bounty hunters. Jabba's palace rose from the desert like a malignant growth, all curved walls and pitted stonework that spoke of centuries weathering Tatooine's twin suns. Samus approached on foot as the last light bled from the sky, her suit's night vision rendering the darkening landscape in sharp green detail. Guard towers flanked the main entrance, primitive but effective, with sentries scanning the dunes through macro binoculars. She'd spent the walk analyzing what she'd learned. This galaxy operated on a currency called credits. A criminal empire existed parallel to legitimate government. Bounty hunting was not only legal, but apparently common enough to be recognized on sight. Most importantly, whoever this Jabba the Hutt was commanded significant resources and influence. Resources meant materials. Materials meant ship repairs. Ship repairs meant escape. The palace entrance was a massive metal door set into the sandstone, flanked by alien statues worn smooth by wind and time. Samus's scan visor detected multiple lifeforms beyond the barrier, along with automated defense systems, primitive kinetic weapons, easily avoided if necessary. She approached directly, making no attempt at stealth. Whatever passed for protocol here, she doubted sneaking in would improve her reception. A mechanical eye extended from the wall beside the door, swiveling to examine her. After a moment, a speaker crackled to life with words her translator now easily parsed. "State your business." "Bounty hunter," Samus replied through her external speakers, using a neutral voice pattern. "Seeking employment." Silence. Then, "Weapons?" Samus considered the question. Her arm cannon was integral to the suit, impossible to remove without catastrophic damage. "Integrated systems. Non-removable." More silence. She could almost hear the debate happening beyond the door. Finally, the eye retracted, and the massive barrier began grinding upward, sand cascading from its lower edge. The entrance tunnel was dark and reeked of decay. Her boot sensors detected organic residue on the floor, blood likely from multiple species. Charming. The tunnel opened into a throne room that belonged in a fever dream. The chamber was vast, lit by flickering torches that cast dancing shadows across walls decorated with alien artifacts and trophies. A band played discordant music in one corner, creatures she couldn't classify producing sounds that barely qualified as melody. Dancers moved on a circular platform, their movements suggesting this was entertainment for someone's benefit. And on a raised dais at the far end, lounging on a massive cushioned throne, was the largest slug-like creature Samus had ever encountered, Jabba the Hutt. Her scan visor struggled with the physiology, mass approximately 1,000 kilograms, no apparent skeletal structure, biology completely alien to anything in her database. Small eyes regarded her with calculating intelligence as she crossed the throne room, dozens of other aliens parting to let her pass. Guards, courtiers, hangers-on, all watching the armored stranger with mixtures of curiosity and hostility. Samus stopped at the base of the dais. Jabba rumbled something in a language her translator tagged as Hutus, working through the patterns in real time. "Ho, ho, ho!" The crime lord's laughter was wet and somehow obscene. What strange prey finds its way to my palace? Are you droid or dancer, little armored one? A thin humanoid beside the throne, human male, advanced age, nervous disposition, translated into galactic basic. The mighty Jabba asks what brings you to his palace. Employment, Samus said directly. No point in elaborate protocol. I'm a bounty hunter. The translator, Bib Fortuna, her visor identified from database cross-reference with local criminal networks, relayed this to Jabba. The Hutt's laughter intensified, rolls of flesh quivering. He spoke again, longer this time. The mighty Jabba says the galaxy is full of those who claim to be hunters. Fortuna translated. He asks what makes you special enough to waste his time. Samus had anticipated this. She raised her arm cannon, targeting systems locking onto a piece of decorative metalwork hanging from the far wall. 50 meters distant, partially obscured by smoke, swaying slightly in air currents. The power beam charged with its characteristic whine, energy coalescing in the barrel. She fired. The plasma bolt crossed the throne room in a flash of golden light, struck the metalwork dead center, and vaporized it instantly. The molten remnants splattered against stone, still glowing. The music stopped. Every conversation died. Even Jabba's amusement faded into something more calculating. That, Samus said into the silence, makes me special. Jabba's eyes narrowed. He spoke again, this time with no humor in his tone. Fortuna translated, the mighty Jabba is impressed, but accuracy is not enough. He asks if you can bring him what others cannot, if you can succeed where his current hunters have failed. Specify the target. More rumbling Hutties. There is a smuggler who owes Jabba considerable credits. Captain of a Corellian freighter. Has evaded our hunters for months. Bring him back alive, and the mighty Jabba will pay handsomely. Fail, and you will decorate the walls alongside other failed hunters. A holographic projector activated, displaying an image. Human male, late 20s to early 30s, cocky expression, brown hair, distinctive vest. Han Solo, Fortuna continued. Last known location, Ord Mantell system. Bounty, 20,000 credits. Samus's tactical computer filed the information automatically. 20,000 credits. She had no context for whether that was significant, but the way Fortuna said it suggested substantial value. More importantly, this was a test. Succeed and she'd have access to Jabba's resources. Fail and she'd likely end up as wall decoration. I'll need a ship, she said. Mine is damaged. Jabba laughed again, clearly enjoying himself. Fortuna translated, the mighty Jabba says if you're truly skilled, you'll acquire your own transportation. Perhaps from this smuggler you're hunting. Bring him back, and Jabba will provide materials to repair your ship, along with payment. It was a calculated insult, but also logical from the crime lord's perspective. No investment in an unproven asset. Samus respected the pragmatism, even if it complicated her situation. Understood, she said. When I return with Solo, have the materials ready. She turned to leave, but Jabba's voice stopped her, a single word that needed no translation. Wait. Samus turned back. The Hutt was studying her with unsettling intensity, as if trying to see through her armor's impenetrable faceplate. Jabba spoke at length, and Fortuna's translation came carefully. The mighty Jabba asks, what are you? You move like a warrior but speak like a droid. You dress like Mandalorian but have no clan markings. You carry weapons he's never seen in 50 years of controlling this sector. So he asks again, what are you? It was a fair question. Samus considered her options. The truth was impossible to explain and would only invite dangerous curiosity. A lie might be discovered, but a partial truth. I'm from very far away, she said finally, beyond the outer rim, beyond any charts you have. I was tracking pirates when I ended up here. Now I just want to repair my ship and leave. Fortuna translated. Jabba's response came after a long pause. Ho ho ho. Beyond all charts? Then perhaps the galaxy has more secrets than even Jabba knows. Very well, mysterious hunter. Bring me Solo, and Jabba will help you return to your distant home. But cross the mighty Jabba, and you will never leave Tatooine, except as bones in the sand. Understood. This time when she turned to leave, no one stopped her. The throne room's inhabitants parted like water, giving her wide berth as she crossed back to the entrance tunnel. Behind her, conversations resumed in hushed tones, speculation about the armored stranger, bets on whether she'd succeed or become another cautionary tale. Outside, the desert night had fully descended, stars scattered across the sky in patterns she didn't recognize. No constellations from her home galaxy, no familiar reference points, just alien stars above an alien world, and a mission to hunt down a smuggler she'd never heard of in a galaxy she didn't understand. Samus activated her comm system, trying once again to contact her gunship's AI. Static answered, along with a faint signal. Her ship was still intact, still waiting in the Dune Sea. She began walking back toward Mos Eisley. She needed more information on this Han Solo, on the Ord Mantell system, and on how to acquire transportation off this desert tomb. The cantina would have answers. Every criminal hub did. What she didn't know was that her display in Jabba's palace had already attracted attention beyond the Hutt's criminal network. A message was being transmitted to an Imperial garrison commander on the far side of Tatooine, accompanied by grainy security footage of a golden plasma bolt vaporizing solid metal. The Empire had strict protocols for unidentified advanced technology, and those protocols always began the same way: investigate, analyze, acquire. The Imperial garrison at Mos Eisley was a utilitarian block of gray duracrete that stood in stark contrast to the sandstone architecture surrounding it. Stormtroopers patrolled in pairs, their white armor somehow remaining pristine despite the omnipresent dust. Samus watched from a rooftop 3 blocks away as the garrison's communications array pulsed with activity, transmissions flowing in and out at a rate that suggested something had their attention. She'd spent 2 days gathering intelligence on Han Solo. The smuggler had a reputation: skilled pilot, chronic debtor, and apparently foolish enough to cross both the Hutt cartels and the Empire simultaneously. Multiple sources placed him near Ord Mantell, but no one had current coordinates. More problematic was the transportation issue. Every ship in Mos Eisley's spaceport required either ownership credentials or connections she didn't have. Her scan visor tracked patrol patterns, noting the precision of Imperial movements. These weren't the disorganized criminals of Jabba's palace. These were trained soldiers operating under unified command. Dangerous in different ways. The decision was made for her when 4 stormtroopers rounded the corner of her building, accompanied by an officer in a gray uniform. Her audio sensors picked up their conversation clearly. "Unconfirmed reports, but the energy signature doesn't match any known weapon system," the officer was saying. "Command wants visual confirmation before escalating to ISB." "Sir, if it's rebel technology," one trooper began, "then we contain it immediately. The Empire does not tolerate threats to order, especially on backwater planets where dissent breeds in the shadows." They were hunting her, or more accurately, hunting whatever they thought she was. Samus dropped from the rooftop in a controlled fall, servo motors absorbing the 3-story impact without sound. She landed behind the patrol, cannon already charged. "Halt!" The officer spun, hand reaching for his sidearm. "Identify yourself immediately." The stormtroopers' blaster rifles came up in trained unison, targeting her center mass. Decent discipline. In any other circumstances, it would have been an adequate response. "You've been looking for me," Samus said through her speakers. "Here I am." The officer's eyes widened as he processed her armor. The distinctive orange and red plating, the arm-mounted weapon, the reflective visor that revealed nothing. "You're the unidentified contact from Jabba's palace. By authority of the Galactic Empire, I'm ordering you to power down your weapons and submit to questioning." Samus's tactical computer calculated 23 ways to neutralize this threat in under 5 seconds. She chose none of them. Not yet. Questioning about what? Your armor. Your weapons. Your presence on an Imperial-controlled world. The officer's hand tightened on his blaster. "You will comply, or you will be detained by force. I'm a bounty hunter, not breaking any laws. The Empire determines what constitutes lawful behavior, and unregistered advanced technology falls under military jurisdiction. You will surrender your equipment for analysis, or..." Samus moved. The speed booster activated in a burst of acceleration that left the Imperials frozen in comparison. She closed the distance to the nearest stormtrooper in a microsecond, her armored fist connecting with his chest plate hard enough to crack the plastoid armor and send him flying backward into his companion. Both went down in a tangle of white armor and limbs. The third trooper fired, a brilliant red bolt that would have killed an unarmored target. Samus's energy shielding absorbed it like a raindrop, the plasma dissipating across her suit's exterior in a shower of harmless sparks. She returned fire with a stun shot from her arm cannon, the modified beam striking the trooper and overloading his armor systems. He collapsed unconscious. The fourth trooper and the officer backed away, weapons raised but hands shaking. They just watched her casually dismiss an entire fire team. "I don't serve the Empire," Samus said, her voice flat and final, "and my equipment is not for analysis." She fired twice more, stun shots non-lethal. Both Imperials crumpled. Samus stood in the empty street surrounded by unconscious soldiers, aware that her window of opportunity had just closed dramatically. The garrison would respond with overwhelming force within minutes. Time to leave Mos Eisley. Her comm system crackled, an incoming transmission on a frequency she hadn't used. Someone had acquired her signal. The voice that emerged was filtered, mechanical, utterly emotionless. "Impressive display. Not many beings can neutralize stormtroopers with such efficiency." Samus traced the signal, coming from orbit. A ship, big one. "Identify yourself." "I am not your enemy, bounty hunter, but the Empire will be after this. You need to leave Tatooine, and I can provide transportation." A pause. "In exchange for your services." "What kind of services?" "The profitable kind. My name is Forlam. I work with a partner, Zuckuss. We're hunters like you. We've been monitoring Imperial communications. They're calling you a potential rebel operative. Once that designation reaches higher command, you'll have Star Destroyers in orbit within a day." Samus processed this. Bounty hunters operating in space, clearly with their own vessel. Exactly what she needed. "What's the job?" "The same one you've already accepted from Jabba, Han Solo. The Hutt pays 20,000, but our client pays 50,000. Considerably better compensation for the same target." "Who's your client?" "That information comes after you're aboard, but I can tell you they have resources the Hutts can only dream of. Enough to repair any ship, no matter how exotic the technology." Another pause. "Our sensors registered your crash landing 4 days ago. Unusual energy signatures. Definitely not from this galaxy, we think. Whatever you are, wherever you're from. Our client might be your best chance of getting home." It was too convenient. Every instinct Samus had developed across 100 missions screamed trap. But the analysis was also correct. Staying on Tatooine meant fighting the Empire, and she had no illusions about winning that war alone. She needed to leave, needed a ship, and needed information about this galaxy's technology. "Coordinates," she said finally. "Docking Bay 47. We'll be waiting." "Oh, and bounty hunter? Come alone, come armed, but don't come hostile. Zuckuss gets nervous around new people, and his nerves make him twitchy with his rifle." The transmission ended. Samus stood in the street, surrounded by groaning stormtroopers beginning to regain consciousness, and made her decision. She activated the speed booster and ran, not away from Mos Eisley's spaceport, but directly toward it, a blur of orange and red that covered blocks in seconds. Docking Bay 47 was occupied by a ship that looked like it had survived multiple wars and possibly an asteroid collision. Mist Hunter, her visor identified from faded hull markings. The boarding ramp was down, and 2 figures stood at its base. One was a droid, humanoid design but clearly mechanical, with insectoid features and multiple sensor arrays. The other was smaller, wrapped in heavy robes and breathing through some kind of respirator apparatus. Both had weapons visible. The droid carried a blaster rifle. The robed figure held what looked like a stun weapon. "You're punctual," the droid, Forlam, said. "We appreciate that. Time is currency in our profession." "Who's your client?" Samus asked directly, cannon prime but not aimed. "The Empire," Zuckuss rasped through his respirator. "Specifically, someone very high in their hierarchy. Someone who finds you interesting." Samus's cannon came up immediately, targeting both hunters. "You're working for the people I just fought?" "Not those Imperials," Forlom said calmly, making no move toward his weapon. "A different branch, one that operates outside normal command structures, one that collects unique individuals, bounty hunters of exceptional skill, hunters like us, and now hunters like you." "Lord Vader wants to meet you," Zukas said, and even through the respirator, Samus could hear the fear in his voice. "He's been looking for new assets, hunters who can accomplish what stormtroopers cannot." When word reached him about an armored warrior using unknown technology, defeating trained soldiers without killing them, he became very interested. The name meant nothing to Samus, but the tone told her everything. Whoever this Vader was, he terrified even other bounty hunters. "And if I refuse, then we leave," Forlom said simply. "We're not enforcers. We're professionals delivering an invitation. But consider this. Vader knows you're on Tatooine. The garrison knows your capabilities. Within hours, every Imperial asset in this sector will be hunting you. You can fight them, perhaps even win locally. But the Empire is vast. Eventually, you'll run out of planets to hide on. Or," Zukas added, "you meet with Lord Vader, hear his offer, and make an informed decision. He rewards those who serve him well, and he has resources, technology, information, ships that could help you repair your vessel and return to wherever you came from." Samus stood at the edge of a decision that would define her time in this galaxy. Work with the authoritarian government she'd just fought against, or remain independent and face their overwhelming might alone. Neither option was appealing, but she'd learned long ago that survival sometimes meant working with distasteful allies. The space pirates had taught her that. The Galactic Federation had reinforced it. This empire was just another name for organized tyranny. "I'll meet him," she said finally, "but I'm not promising anything beyond that conversation." "That's all Lord Vader asks," Forlom said, turning toward the ship. "For now." As the boarding ramp closed behind her and the Mist Hunter's engines roared to life, Samus caught one last glimpse of Tatooine through the viewport, twin suns setting over endless dunes. Somewhere in those sands, her gunship waited. She'd be back for it, one way or another. In the depths of space, light years away, a massive wedge-shaped vessel cut through the void. On its bridge, a figure clad entirely in black armor stood before a viewport, hands clasped behind his back. A communication came through, and a mechanical breathing filled the air as he listened. "Interesting," Darth Vader said, his voice deep and resonant through his respirator. "Very interesting indeed." The executor hung in space like a mechanical predator, 8 kilometers of Imperial engineering designed for a single purpose, projecting Darth Vader's will across the galaxy. Samus watched through the Mist Hunter's viewport as they approached, her scan visor struggling to process the sheer scale. Her gunship could have fit inside one of the docking bays 1,000 times over. "Superstar Destroyer," Forlom explained, piloting them toward a designated hangar. "Lord Vader's flagship, one of the largest vessels in the Imperial Navy, also one of the most feared." "Why feared?" Samus asked, studying the ship's weapon emplacements. "Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, bristling from the hull like mechanical thorns." Zuckus made a sound that might have been dark laughter through his respirator. "Not because of the weapons, because of who commands it." The Mist Hunter settled onto a polished deck that gleamed under harsh, artificial lighting. Through the viewport, Samus counted at least 50 stormtroopers in formation, along with naval officers in gray uniforms and several figures in black armor that looked ceremonial rather than functional, a welcoming committee. "Last chance to reconsider," Forlom said, not unkindly. "Once you walk down that ramp, you're committed to the meeting." Samus checked her suit systems one final time. Energy at full capacity, all weapons operational, shields at maximum. She'd faced worse odds. Probably. The boarding ramp lowered with a hydraulic hiss, and Samus descended into the belly of the Empire. The stormtroopers stood motionless, weapons held at attention rather than ready positions. A good sign. They weren't treating her as an immediate threat. The naval officers watched with barely concealed curiosity, examining her armor with the eyes of engineers and tacticians. The black-armored figures, inquisitors, Her tactical computer tagged them after analyzing posture and equipment, radiated hostility. One of them stepped forward, a woman with angular features and a lightsaber hanging from her belt. The weapon caught Samus's attention immediately. Her scan visor analyzed it. Plasma blade, contained by some kind of magnetic field, power source unknown but generating readings that didn't match any technology in her database. I am the third sister, the Inquisitor said, her voice sharp with authority. You will surrender your weapons before proceeding further. No, Samus replied simply. The third sister's hand moved toward her lightsaber. That was not a request, and my answer wasn't negotiable. Samus's arm cannon hummed, not quite charging, but making its presence unmistakable. Your Lord Vader invited me here. If he wants to meet an unarmed prisoner, he should have said so. I came as a bounty hunter, fully equipped. That doesn't change. You dare! Enough, third sister. The voice cut through the hangar like a blade, deep, mechanically filtered, carrying absolute authority. Every person in the base stiffened. The Inquisitors immediately stepped back, eyes downcast. Even the stormtroopers seemed to hold their breath. Darth Vader walked across the deck with measured steps, each footfall echoing in the sudden silence. He was tall, taller than Samus expected, encased entirely in black armor that reflected the harsh lighting in dark shimmers. A cape flowed behind him, and a helmet covered his entire head, its faceplate featureless except for angular vents and optical sensors that glowed red in the shadows. His breathing was mechanical, rhythmic, like the pulse of some vast machine, but it was the presence that struck Samus most. Something radiated from him, not heat, not energy, but something else entirely. Her scan visor registered it as an unknown field effect, fluctuating around him like invisible waves. It pressed against her awareness, probing, searching. Welcome to the Executor, Vader said, stopping 3 meters away. I am told you defeated an Imperial patrol without casualties. Unusual restraint for someone capable of killing them easily. I don't kill unnecessarily, Samus replied, meeting his gaze, or where she assumed his gaze was beneath that helmet. They were following orders. Poor orders, but still orders. And yet you fled rather than face Imperial justice. Your justice involved confiscating my equipment. That's not negotiable. Vader tilted his head slightly, a gesture that seemed almost curious. Your armor, your weapon. Unlike anything in Imperial databases. Where did you acquire such technology? I didn't acquire it. It was given to me by the Chozo, an ancient civilization from my home galaxy. They raised me, trained me, and equipped me to fight threats most people can't handle. The hangar was absolutely silent. Every officer, every trooper, every Inquisitor was listening to this impossible claim. Your home galaxy, Vader repeated. You claim to be from beyond this one entirely. I don't claim. I am. I was pursuing space pirates through a dimensional anomaly when I ended up here. My ship is damaged, and I can't return without understanding your technology well enough to repair the transition drive. Vader was silent for a long moment, his breathing the only sound. Then, show me. He turned and walked toward an exit, clearly expecting Samus to follow. She exchanged a glance with Forlom. The droid offered what might have been an encouraging nod, and followed the Dark Lord into the depths of his ship. They walked through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate. High ceilings, harsh lighting, every surface polished to perfection. Crew members pressed themselves against walls as Vader passed, fear palpable in their body language. The Inquisitors followed at a distance, hands near their weapons, clearly disapproving of this entire encounter. Vader led her to a vast chamber dominated by a meditation sphere, a spherical pod that split open to reveal a seat within, but he ignored it, instead stopping before a massive viewport that looked out into space. Stars stretched in every direction, cold and infinite. The Force connects all living things, Vader said, his back to her. It flows through every being, binds the galaxy together, grants power to those who can wield it. When your ship crashed on Tatooine, I felt nothing. An absence where presence should be. Technology that exists outside the Force entirely. I don't know what the Force is, Samus admitted, but if it's the energy field my sensors keep detecting around certain individuals, including you, then my technology operates on completely different principles. Demonstrate. Samus raised her arm cannon, targeting a piece of debris floating outside the viewport. A fragment of destroyed ship, dozens of kilometers distant. The plasma beam charged, energy coalescing with a rising whine that made the Inquisitors flinch. She fired. The bolt punched through the viewport's energy field. Her visor registered some kind of protective shield and crossed the void in a streak of superheated plasma. It struck the debris perfectly, vaporizing it in a flash of light. Impressive, Vader said, but power alone does not interest me. The Empire has super weapons that can destroy planets. What interests me is potential, adaptability, the ability to accomplish tasks where others fail. He turned to face her, and again that invisible pressure intensified, as if he was trying to see through her armor by force of will alone. Han Solo, Vader continued, a smuggler, an annoyance who has embarrassed Imperial forces repeatedly. I want him captured and delivered to my custody. Alive. Can you do this? That's the same job Jabba hired me for. Jabba the Hutt pays 20,000 credits. I will pay 100,000. And when you succeed, not if, but when, I will provide you with access to Imperial archives, technology, and resources. Whatever you need to repair your vessel and return home. Samus processed this. 4 times Jabba's payment, plus the resources she desperately needed. But working for this armored warlord meant aligning herself with an authoritarian regime that clearly ruled through fear and military might. What's your interest in Solo, she asked. Why not send your soldiers? Because Solo is clever, resourceful, and has allies who would die to protect him. Stormtroopers are effective against standard threats. They are less effective against individuals who operate outside predictable patterns. You, however, Vader gestured at her armor. You are something this galaxy has never seen. Solo won't expect you. His allies won't know how to counter you. And you have already demonstrated the capability to neutralize trained soldiers without triggering lethal force protocols. You want him alive specifically? Alive and unharmed. He has value to someone who wishes to make an example of his capture. Someone whose displeasure I prefer to avoid. There was something beneath Vader's words, not fear exactly, but calculation. He was serving someone else's agenda, which meant there were layers to this galaxy's power structure she didn't yet understand. I'll need a ship, Samus said, and current intelligence on Solo's location. Both will be provided. You'll travel aboard a Hunter-class transport with full Imperial credentials. That should allow you freedom of movement throughout the Ord Mantell system. Vader paused. There is, however, one condition. Of course there was. What condition? You will be accompanied by one of my Inquisitors. Consider it insurance on my investment. The third sister will ensure you don't simply take Imperial resources and disappear into the void. Samus glanced back at the black-armored woman, who was glaring at her with barely restrained hostility. Perfect. A babysitter who clearly resented her existence. And if I refuse? Then you return to Tatooine alone, hunted by both the Empire and Jabba's organization, with no resources and no allies. Your ship will remain damaged, and eventually you'll be captured or killed. Vader's breathing filled the silence. I am offering you a path forward. Take it or leave it, but decide now. Samus weighed her options. Work with a tyrannical empire under surveillance or fight alone against impossible odds. Neither was ideal, but one gave her a chance to complete repairs and eventually escape this galaxy entirely. I accept, she said finally, but understand this. I'm not joining your empire. I'm completing one job in exchange for payment and resources. After that, we're done. We shall see, Vader said, and somehow she knew he was smiling beneath that mask. Arrangements will be made. Report to Docking Bay 12 in 1 hour. Your associate will be waiting. He turned back to the viewport, clearly dismissing her. The Inquisitors moved to escort her out, but Vader's voice stopped them. One more thing, bounty hunter. What do they call you? Samus paused at the doorway. Samus Aran. Samus Aran, Vader repeated, testing the foreign syllables. Remember this. The Empire rewards success and punishes failure with equal efficiency. Do not disappoint me. As she walked back through the corridors toward the hangar, Samus couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a deal with something far more dangerous than any space pirate or Federation bureaucrat she'd encountered before. Behind her, in his meditation chamber, Darth Vader stood alone and reached out through the Force, trying once more to sense the armored warrior. But where her presence should have been, there was only void, an absence that troubled him more than any threat he could perceive. Something had entered his galaxy that existed beyond the Force's reach, and that made her either the perfect tool or the perfect threat. The third sister's hatred was palpable even through the silence. She sat across from Samus in the Hunter-class transport's cramped passenger bay, fingers drumming rhythmically against her lightsaber hilt, eyes never leaving the orange and red armor. They'd been in hyperspace for 6 hours, and neither had spoken a word since departure. Samus didn't mind. She'd spent the time analyzing data that Imperial intelligence had provided on Han Solo. Corellian smuggler, 32 standard years old, captain of a heavily modified YT-1300 light freighter designated the Millennium Falcon. Multiple outstanding debts, numerous arrests, 0 convictions. Associates included a Wookiee co-pilot named Chewbacca and a network of contacts throughout the criminal underworld. Last confirmed sighting, Ord Mantell City Spaceport, 3 days ago. The file was thorough, but Samus had learned to read between lines. Solo survived not through superior firepower, but through unpredictability, improvisation, and apparently legendary luck. Exactly the kind of target that frustrated systematic hunters. "You're not what I expected," the third sister said suddenly, breaking the silence. Samus looked up from the datapad. "What did you expect?" "Someone more impressive. Vader speaks of you like you're some kind of mythical warrior, but I see armor and weapons. Nothing I haven't faced before." Her hand tightened on the lightsaber. "I've killed Jedi. I've hunted Force sensitives across the galaxy. What makes you special?" "I don't use the Force," Samus replied evenly. "That makes me something you've never hunted before." "Exactly, you're powerless. A soldier in fancy armor." The third sister leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. We locate Solo. I capture him using the Force, and you stand back and watch how real hunters work. Then I report to Lord Vader that his unique asset contributed nothing. Maybe then he'll stop wasting resources on aliens who don't belong here." Samus returned her attention to the datapad. She'd encountered this type before. Insecure, territorial, desperate to prove superiority. Engaging would only escalate tensions. Better to let performance speak when the time came. "Ignoring me won't change reality," the third sister continued. "The Force gives me power you can't comprehend. I can sense lies, manipulate minds, move objects with thought alone. What can you do besides shoot things?" "Shoot things very accurately," Samus said without looking up. The Inquisitor's face flushed. "You think—" The transport's AI interrupted. "Exiting hyperspace in 30 seconds. Ord Mantell system approaching." Both warriors fell silent as the ship dropped from faster-than-light travel. Through the viewport, a greenish planet materialized, its surface scarred by industrial development and weapons testing ranges. Ord Mantell, officially neutral territory, practically a haven for smugglers and criminals fleeing Imperial jurisdiction. "Imperial codes are uploaded," the AI reported. "Local authorities recognize us as Priority Transport 779, clearance level beta. We have freedom of movement throughout the system. Take us to the main spaceport," the third sister commanded, "and scan for ships matching the Millennium Falcon signature. Negative contact in orbit. Multiple vessels match general classification, but specific identification requires closer proximity." Samus activated her own scanning systems as they descended through the atmosphere. Ord Mantell City sprawled below them, a chaotic mess of industrial zones, entertainment districts, and residential blocks that had grown organically over centuries without central planning. Perfect place to disappear. Also perfect place to find information if you knew where to look. The spaceport was controlled chaos. Ships of every size and configuration occupied landing pads. Cargo moved through automated systems, and security checkpoints filtered the endless flow of beings seeking profit or escape. The Hunter-class transport settled onto a designated pad, its imperial credentials ensuring priority placement. We start with informants, the third sister said, activating her comlink. Imperial intelligence maintains contacts throughout the criminal network. Someone will know where Solo is hiding. Samus shook her head. That approach will spook him. Everyone in this spaceport knows the Empire wants Solo. The moment your contacts start asking questions, word spreads. Solo hears about it and runs. Then what do you suggest? We become customers. Smugglers need work to pay for fuel and repairs. Solo's in debt, which means he's desperate for credits. We put out word that we need something transported, no questions asked. High risk, high reward. Exactly the kind of job that attracts desperate captains. The third sister considered this, clearly reluctant to defer to Samus's judgment. And if he doesn't take the bait, then we try your way, but this method doesn't alert him that we're hunters. We become just another potential employer in a spaceport full of them. After a long pause, the Inquisitor nodded. Fine, but I'm monitoring all communications. If this fails, we do it my way. They exited the transport into Ord Mantell's humid air, thick with the smell of fuel and exotic foods from vendor stalls. The crowd was diverse. Humans, Rhodians, Duros, Twi'leks, and species Samus's database still couldn't classify. She towered over most of them, her armor drawing stares and quickly cleared space around her. The third sister led them toward a cantina called the Lucky Despot, its entrance marked by flickering neon that advertised cheap drinks and expensive company. Inside, the atmosphere was predictably dim and smoky. A band played music that sounded like someone torturing a mechanical creature. Patrons hunched over drinks or conducted business in shadowy booths. Wait here, the third sister ordered, heading toward the bar. I'll make contact with our informant. Samus took position near the entrance, back to the wall, scanning the room methodically. Her audio sensors filtered through conversations, translator working overtime to process multiple languages simultaneously. Most were mundane: business deals, personal complaints, boasts about past exploits. But one conversation caught her attention. Two humans in a corner booth, speaking in hushed tones. "R told me the Falcon's still in the system. Solo's trying to offload some cargo before the imps catch up with him. Probably at the old fuel depot near Junction 7. Samus filed that information away. Junction 7, her visor pulled up schematics of Ord Mantell City, locating the area in an industrial sector on the city's eastern edge. Abandoned fuel depot would provide good cover for illicit transactions. The third sister returned, frustration evident in her rigid posture. Informant claims he hasn't seen Solo in weeks. Either he's lying, or Solo's gone to ground deeper than expected. Or he's at Junction 7, Samus said, relaying what she'd overheard. The Inquisitor's eyes narrowed. You're certain? Overheard two locals discussing it. Could be misdirection, but it's a lead worth investigating. They left the Lucky Despot and requisitioned a speeder from the transport's vehicle bay, a sleek Imperial Scout model capable of rapid movement through urban environments. The third sister piloted with aggressive efficiency, weaving through traffic at speeds that would have been reckless for anyone with slower reflexes. Junction 7 appeared as they crested an industrial ridge, a vast complex of rusted fuel tanks and corroded pipelines, clearly abandoned years ago. Perfect hiding spot. Samus's thermal imaging detected a ship's heat signature deep within the complex, roughly 30 meters long, emissions consistent with a modified light freighter's power plant. That could be the Falcon, the third sister said, bringing the speeder down behind a derelict storage building. But if Solo's as paranoid as his file suggests, he'll have sensors watching the approaches. Samus activated her scan visor, analyzing the depot's layout. Multiple entry points, numerous blind spots, and yes, several primitive sensor emplacements monitoring the main access routes. Cheap technology, but functional enough to detect approaching speeders or large groups. I'll go in alone, Samus said. Small profile, and my suit has stealth capabilities your Empire hasn't developed yet. Absolutely not. Lord Vader assigned me to supervise. Supervise from here. If Solo detects two of us, he'll run. If he detects just me, he might stay to fight, which gives us the advantage. Samus met the Inquisitor's glare. You wanted to see what makes me special. Watch. Before the third sister could protest further, Samus activated her suit's cloaking systems, Chozo technology that bent light around her armor, rendering her functionally invisible. The Inquisitor's eyes widened as Samus simply vanished from view. How? But Samus was already moving, crossing the open ground toward the depot in complete silence. Her boots barely disturbed the dust, servo motors calibrated for stealth operations. The sensors she'd detected passed right over her position, registering nothing. The Millennium Falcon sat in the depot's central bay, just as she'd predicted, and it was exactly as advertised. A battered YT-1300 that looked like it had survived multiple wars through sheer stubbornness and improvisation. Scorched hull plating, mismatched repair panels, modifications that probably violated every safety regulation in the galaxy. Two figures moved near the boarding ramp. One was human, tall, dark hair, wearing the vest and blaster holster that matched Solo's description perfectly. The other was massive, covered in brown fur, easily over 2 meters tall. The Wookiee Chewbacca. They were loading cargo crates, working quickly, clearly preparing for imminent departure. Samus calculated approach vectors, considering her options. Stun both from distance or close for capture. Solo had a reputation for fast draws and faster talking. Better not to give him the opportunity for either. She raised her arm cannon, targeting systems locking onto Solo's center mass. The paralyzer beam charged, non-lethal, specifically designed to incapacitate without permanent damage. Perfect for this situation. She fired. The blue-white beam crossed 30 meters in an instant, struck Han Solo directly in the chest, and dissipated harmlessly against some kind of energy field. Solo spun, blaster already in his hand, firing at where the beam had originated, despite seeing nothing. "Chewie, we got company!" The Wookiee roared, raising a bowcaster, a primitive but devastating weapon that her visor flagged as extremely dangerous. Both were now alert, weapons ready, searching for an invisible threat they couldn't see. Samus's tactical computer recalculated. The energy field, a personal shield generator, similar to her own technology but cruder. It had absorbed the paralyzer shot. Standard stun weapons wouldn't work. Time for a different approach. She deactivated her cloak, materializing 15 meters from Solo like a ghost becoming solid. Both Smuggler and Wookiee froze, staring at the armored warrior who'd appeared from nowhere. "Han Solo," Samus said calmly, "you're coming with me." Solo's expression cycled through surprise, confusion, and then settled on his trademark cocky grin. "Lady, I don't know what kind of costume party you escaped from, but I'm a little busy right now. How about you turn around, walk away, and we pretend this never happened?" "Not an option." "Yeah, I figured." Solo's blaster came up fast. 3 shots in rapid succession. Red bolts that would have killed an unshielded target. Samus's energy barriers absorbed them easily, the plasma dissipating across her suit's exterior. Solo stared at his smoking blaster, then at her. "Okay, that's new." Chewbacca fired his bowcaster. The explosive quarrel struck Samus's shield with considerably more force, actually staggering her back a step. Dangerous weapon. She returned fire with a charged power beam shot, the golden bolt striking the ground between the 2 smugglers and detonating in a shower of concrete and flame. Both dove for cover behind cargo crates. Solo shouted over the chaos, "Chewie, get the ship ready! I'll handle our new friend!" The Wookiee roared acknowledgement and charged up the Falcon's boarding ramp. Engines began powering up immediately. Clearly, they'd been prepared for rapid escape. Samus calculated vectors. If the Falcon lifted off, pursuing would be nearly impossible without her gunship. She had perhaps 30 seconds before Solo made it aboard, and they escaped into Ord Mantell's orbital traffic. She activated the speed booster. The world blurred as she accelerated to superhuman velocity, crossing the distance to Solo's cover in a fraction of a second. He looked up, eyes widening in shock, and then she was on him, one armored hand clamping around his wrist, preventing him from raising his blaster. "I said you're coming with me," Samus repeated. Solo grinned despite the situation, even as she twisted his wrist to force him to drop the blaster. "You know, usually when someone this determined comes after me, there's at least dinner first." Then he did something Samus didn't expect. He kissed her, or rather, he tried to. His lips met her helmet's faceplate, which had exactly zero romantic effect, but did distract her for a critical half-second. Solo used that moment to activate something on his belt, a sonic grenade that detonated with a concussive blast strong enough to throw even her armored form backward. Samus landed hard, suit absorbing the impact. By the time she'd recovered, Solo was halfway up the Falcon's ramp, Chewbacca's massive hand reaching down to pull him aboard. "Nothing personal, sweetheart," Solo shouted over the engine roar. "But I've got a schedule to keep and creditors to avoid. Maybe next time." The Falcon's engine screamed, repulsor lifts engaging. Samus fired desperately, power beam shots scorching the hull but failing to penetrate whatever shielding Solo had installed. The ship rose into Ord Mantell's polluted sky, rotated with surprising grace for something so battered, and rocketed toward orbit. Samus stood in the empty depot, watching her target escape, and did something she rarely did. She cursed, quietly but with feeling. Her comlink crackled. "I saw everything," the third sister's voice dripped with satisfaction. "So much for your legendary skills. Should I report your failure to Lord Vader, or would you prefer to do it yourself?" Samus ignored her, already running calculations. The Falcon was fast, possibly faster than her gunship even at full capacity, but ships needed fuel, and Solo was in debt, which meant limited resources. He'd stop somewhere to refuel or pick up work, and when he did, she'd be waiting. "We're not done," Samus said, heading back toward the speeder. "This is just the first round." The third sister was smiling when Samus arrived. "First round you lost. Perhaps now you'll let me handle this my way." Samus said nothing, but her mind was already working through the problem. Han Solo was clever, resourceful, and apparently shameless. He'd expected bounty hunters, had defenses prepared, and possessed a ship that could outrun most pursuit. But he'd made one critical mistake. He'd revealed his capabilities. Now she knew what she was dealing with, and Samus Aran always learned from the first encounter. The executor's briefing room was cold, sterile, and currently occupied by one very displeased Sith Lord. Darth Vader stood at the head of a conference table, his mechanical breathing the only sound as Samus delivered her report on the failed capture attempt. The third sister stood to the side, barely concealing her smug satisfaction. "He escaped," Vader said, each word deliberate and heavy. "Despite your technological advantages, despite the element of surprise, Han Solo remains at large." "He was prepared," Samus replied evenly. "Personal shield generator, modified ship with military-grade engines, pre-planned escape routes. Someone tipped him off that hunters were coming. Excuses are for those who lack competence." Vader turned to the third sister. "And you? What is your assessment?" The Inquisitor straightened, eager to deliver her judgment. "Lord Vader, the bounty hunter proved ineffective. Her armor is impressive, but Solo's quick thinking and superior knowledge of—" "I asked for assessment, not gloating." Vader's voice dropped to a dangerous register. "You were present. You allowed the target to escape as thoroughly as she did. Why did you not intervene?" The third sister's satisfaction evaporated. "My lord, I was maintaining perimeter security as instructed. If I had known she would fail, then you also failed." Vader swept his hand dismissively. "Leave us." The Inquisitor's face flushed with anger and humiliation, but she bowed stiffly and exited without another word. The door hissed shut behind her, leaving Samus alone with the Dark Lord. Vader turned his attention back to her, and that invisible pressure intensified, probing, searching, trying to understand this anomaly that existed outside the Force. "Tell me what you learned." Samus accessed her suit's recorded data, projecting holographic footage of the encounter onto the table. "Solo's shield generator is commercial grade, probably Corellian manufacture. It stopped my paralyzer beam but would fail against sustained plasma fire. His Wookiee partner carries a bowcaster, primitive weapon, but kinetic energy output is substantial. Could threaten unshielded opponents." She advanced the footage. "The Millennium Falcon has been heavily modified. Engine output suggests hyperdrive class zero point 0.5, possibly faster. Maneuvering thrusters are overtuned. Hull reinforcement around critical systems. This isn't a cargo hauler anymore. It's a combat vessel disguised as one." "You sound impressed," Vader observed. "I'm analytical. Solo's good at what he does, That doesn't mean he's unbeatable, just that underestimating him would be a mistake. Vader was silent for a long moment, studying the frozen hologram of Han Solo's cocky grin. The third sister believes you failed because you lack the Force, that your technology, however advanced, is insufficient against an opponent who relies on instinct and improvisation. The third sister spent the entire mission trying to prove I'm inadequate instead of focusing on the objective. That's why we both failed. Perhaps, Vader clasped his hands behind his back, or perhaps you are both inadequate in different ways. The Inquisitors hunt Force sensitives, not clever smugglers. And you hunt creatures and machines in your galaxy, not humans with luck that borders on supernatural. Samus bristled but held her tongue. He wasn't entirely wrong. Her experience was with space pirates, Metroids, rogue AI constructs, opponents that fought with predictable patterns based on biology or programming. Han Solo fought with chaos, improvisation, and apparently no sense of self-preservation. However, Vader continued, failure is instructive only if one learns from it. What is your next move? Track the Falcon. Solo needs fuel, supplies, and work. He'll surface somewhere, and when he does, I'll be ready. This time without distractions. The third sister is a distraction? She's a liability. She wants to prove herself superior more than she wants to complete the mission. That makes her predictable and dangerous. Samus met Vader's hidden gaze directly. If you want Solo captured, let me work alone. Vader's breathing filled the silence as he considered. Then, no. That's a mistake. Perhaps, but I did not survive as long as I have by trusting newcomers completely. He turned to face her fully. You will continue working with the third sister, but she will follow your operational plan, not dictate her own. I will make this clear to her. And if she refuses, then she will learn that Lord Vader's displeasure is unpleasant. Something in his tone suggested past examples. But there is another matter we must address. Your performance was not entirely inadequate. Solo escaped, yes, but you demonstrated capabilities that intrigue me. He gestured, and the hologram shifted to show Samus vanishing from view. This cloaking technology, how does it function? Light refraction using Chozo-engineered particles. Not true invisibility, thermal imaging can still detect me, and certain sensor types would register anomalies. But against visual detection and most standard scanners, it's effective. And this. The hologram showed her speed booster activation, the blur of motion as she crossed 30 meters in a fraction of a second. Enhanced speed beyond what repulsor technology provides. Kinetic enhancement through controlled energy discharge. Momentum builds during acceleration, allowing sustained high-velocity movement. The suit's servo motors handle the physical stress. Vader was silent, processing. Technology the Empire does not possess. Technology that could give us advantages in countless scenarios. He turned to her. How would you feel about sharing these specifications? I wouldn't. Samus kept her tone firm. This armor and its systems are Chozo legacy technology, given to me specifically. They're not weapons to be mass-produced. Even if such production could help you return to your galaxy? It was a calculated offer, and Samus recognized the trap immediately. Give Vader the technology, and she'd be giving a totalitarian empire tools for oppression. Refuse, and she'd lose access to resources that could repair her ship. The technology wouldn't work for your soldiers, she said, choosing her words carefully. The suit's neural interface is calibrated to my specific physiology. The Chozo designed it for a single user, enhanced through their genetic modifications. Reverse engineering might yield basic principles, but you'd never replicate full functionality. Then perhaps your continued service is more valuable than technology transfer. Vader's mechanical breathing seemed to quicken slightly. I have another proposition. Forget Han Solo temporarily. There is a more pressing matter that requires someone with your unique capabilities. What matter? An Imperial research station in the Labea system has stopped responding to communications. Last transmission indicated a containment breach of unknown origin. Standard security forces report unusual readings before contact was lost. The third sister detected a disturbance in the force emanating from that location. Samus's tactical instincts activated immediately. You think it's connected to force phenomena? Unknown, but whatever is happening there exists outside normal Imperial operations. Something has compromised a secure facility, and I need to know what before it spreads. Vader's helmet tilted slightly. You hunt dangerous creatures in your galaxy, correct? Threats that require specialized equipment and skills to neutralize? That's a large part of what I do, yes. Then this should be familiar territory. Investigate the station, determine the threat, eliminate it if possible, report back if not. He paused. Payment will be 200,000 credits, plus full access to Imperial technology databases for your ship repairs. Additionally, if you succeed where my Inquisitors have hesitated, I may reconsider the supervision requirement for future operations. It was a substantial offer, 4 times what Solo was worth, and the promise of working independently. But research stations with containment breaches triggered every warning instinct Samus had developed across decades of hunting bioweapons and rogue experiments. What kind of research was the station conducting? Classified Imperial science. I could provide details, but they would mean nothing to you. References to experiments and materials that don't exist in your galaxy. Try me. Vader studied her for a long moment, then gestured. A holographic schematic appeared, showing a space station in orbit around a barren planet. The facility was researching applications of kyber crystals, force-attuned minerals used in lightsaber construction. Specifically, they were testing whether kyber crystal resonance could be weaponized on a larger scale. Samus's scan visor automatically analyzed the schematic, noting power distribution patterns and structural weaknesses. And something went wrong with the research. Something consumed the research. Last transmission showed researchers in distress, but no clear indication of the threat. Video feeds showed shadows, movement that shouldn't exist, then silence. It sounded disturbingly familiar. Samus had encountered enough Phazon corruption and X-parasite outbreaks to recognize the pattern. Research into powerful energy sources leading to unexpected catastrophic failure. I'll need full facility schematics, research logs, and personnel roster. Also, any environmental data from before the breach. All will be provided. The third sister will accompany you as before. Alone would be more efficient, perhaps, but efficiency is not my only concern. The third sister needs to learn humility, and you need to learn that the Force, while foreign to you, is a reality of this galaxy that must be respected. Vader's breathing seemed to carry weight beyond its mechanical rhythm. Work together or fail separately. Those are your options. Samus knew when she'd lost a negotiation. Understood. When do we depart? Immediately. A shuttle is being prepared. And Samus Aran? Vader's voice dropped to something almost conversational. Prove that my interest in you is justified. Prove that you are more than simply a warrior in advanced armor. Show me that wherever you come from, you bring capabilities this galaxy needs. As Samus left the briefing room, she couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was a test, not just of her combat abilities, but of something else. Vader was evaluating her, measuring her against some internal standard she didn't yet understand. The third sister waited in the corridor outside, her expression carefully neutral now. Whatever Vader had communicated to her about the new command structure, it had clearly been unpleasant. Research station, the Inquisitor said flatly. Containment breach. Lovely. You've dealt with this kind of situation before? Once, on Jural 7. A Sith artifact was unearthed, and its dark energy corrupted everyone in the excavation site. We had to purge the entire facility with orbital bombardment. She looked at Samus. If that's what we're facing, your armor won't protect you from corruption that attacks the mind. And the Force will? The Force is everything. It can shield, strengthen, even heal those who wield it properly. You have none of that. You're just... The third sister trailed off, searching for words. Just material, flesh and metal, no connection to the galaxy's fundamental energy. Whatever is in that station, if it's force-based, you're defenseless. Samus considered this. If the third sister was right, she was heading into a situation where her greatest advantage, advanced technology, might be irrelevant against threats that operated on principles she didn't understand. But she'd faced similar challenges before. Metroid energy absorption, phazon corruption, X-parasite mimicry. Every new horror required adaptation, analysis, and eventually solution. Then you handle the force aspects, Samus said, and I'll handle everything else. If we stop competing and start cooperating, we might both survive. The third sister was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. Agreed. But when this is over, and when we return to hunting solo, we settle which of us is truly superior. Deal. They walked together toward the hangar bay, an uneasy truce forming between technological warrior and force-wielding inquisitor. Behind them, in his meditation chamber, Darth Vader watched their departure through the Force. The armored stranger was adapting faster than he'd anticipated. Good. The galaxy was changing, and those who couldn't adapt would be consumed by it. But there was something else he sensed. A darkness gathering in the Libea system. Something that had nothing to do with the Force and everything to do with the arrogance of Imperial science. Whatever waited at that research station, it would test both warriors in ways neither expected. And if they failed, Vader would learn something equally valuable. Whether this outsider from another galaxy was asset or liability. Either way, the knowledge would be useful. The Libea system was lifeless, a dying star surrounded by barren rocks that would never support habitation. The research station hung in high orbit above the third planet, a skeletal construct of metal and reinforced transparasteel that reflected the star's sickly orange light. As their shuttle approached, Samus's scan visor registered concerning data. No life signs, minimal power output, hull breaches in 3 sections. Looks abandoned, the third sister observed, peering through the viewport. Her hand rested on her lightsaber, fingers twitching with nervous energy. Looks dangerous, Samus corrected. Her visor was detecting something else. Energy readings that fluctuated in patterns that matched nothing in her database. Not electrical, not thermal, not radiation. Something else entirely. What does the Force tell you? The third sister closed her eyes, reaching out through invisible channels. When she opened them again, her face was pale. Death, pain, and something hungry. I've felt dark side artifacts before, felt their corruption. This is different. This wants something. The shuttle docked at the station's primary airlock. Standard protocols required atmosphere checks, decontamination procedures, security clearances. Samus bypassed all of them. Her suit's internal life support rendering environmental concerns irrelevant. The third sister activated her own rebreather, a compact unit that fit over her nose and mouth. The airlock cycled, inner door hissing open to reveal darkness beyond. Emergency lighting flickered sporadically, casting the corridor in intermittent red shadows. Samus's enhanced vision rendered everything in sharp detail. Scorch marks on walls, dried blood trailing along the floor, blast doors sealed in emergency lockdown positions. Stay close, Samus said, arm cannon charged and ready. Watch our flanks. They moved through the station methodically, checking each room and corridor. The facility was small, maybe 50 personnel at full capacity, dedicated entirely to kyber crystal research. Laboratories contained sophisticated equipment Samus's visor struggled to categorize, though the underlying principles seemed related to crystalline resonance and energy amplification. The first bodies appeared in Lab 3. 5 researchers, Imperial uniforms torn and stained, sprawled across the floor in positions that suggested violent death. But no visible wounds, no blaster burns, no signs of physical trauma, just corpses with expressions of absolute terror frozen on their faces. The third sister knelt beside one, reaching out to touch the body. She jerked back immediately, gasping. He died screaming. They all did. I can feel their final moments. Fear so intense it stopped their hearts. Fear of what? Samus scanned the corpse, analyzing for toxins, pathogens, anything that could explain death without injury. Her visor found nothing conclusive. Elevated stress hormones, cardiac arrest, brain activity that had simply ceased. I don't know. The Force shows me their terror, but not its source. Whatever killed them exists outside normal perception. The third sister stood, lightsaber igniting with a snap hiss that cast the lab in crimson light. We're not alone here. Samus had reached the same conclusion. Her motion sensors were registering movement. Fleeting, impossible to pinpoint, always at the edge of detection range. Something was in the station with them, something that moved through spaces where nothing should be. They continued deeper, following signs of struggle toward the station's core. More bodies, more expressions of terror. And then they found the research chamber. It was a vast spherical room, walls lined with kyber crystals of various sizes, from fragments no larger than a fingernail to massive formations that pulsed with internal light. At the chamber's center, suspended in a containment field that flickered weakly, was the largest crystal Samus had ever seen. 3 meters tall, perfectly formed, glowing with energy that her visor registered as off-the-scale dangerous. And surrounding it, flowing through the air like living smoke, were the shadows. They had no definite shape, formless darkness that coalesced and dispersed randomly, moving with predatory intelligence. Samus's scan visor struggled to analyze them. No molecular structure, no heat signature, no electromagnetic properties. They existed as absence rather than presence, voids in space where light and matter simply ceased. Force entities, the third sister whispered, her voice tight with fear. Dark side manifestations. The Kyber crystal research must have torn a rift between the physical realm and somewhere else. As if responding to her words, the shadows surged forward. Samus fired immediately, power beam shots that tore through the darkness like golden lances. The shadows recoiled from the plasma, dissipating where her fire struck, but reforming moments later. They moved fast, flowing across walls and ceiling like liquid night, reaching toward both warriors with tendrils of absolute blackness. The third sister's lightsaber whirled in defensive patterns, the crimson blade cutting through shadow tendrils that tried to grasp her. Where the lightsaber struck, the darkness hissed and retreated, clearly vulnerable to whatever energy the weapon channeled. "They're manifestations of the dark side," the third sister shouted over the chaos. "Physical weapons won't work. They exist between matter and energy." Samus switched to her wave beam, firing shots that rippled through multiple dimensions simultaneously. The effect was immediate. Shadows shrieked, though she heard it through sensors rather than audio, and fragmented pieces of darkness scattering like shattered glass. "That worked," Samus noted, adjusting her targeting protocols. "Whatever they are, dimensional weapons affect them." "The Force affects them," the third sister corrected, Force pushing a mass of shadows away from her position. "We need to destroy the Kyber crystal. It's the anchor point for their manifestation." Samus assessed the massive crystal, still pulsing in its failing containment field. Destroying it would likely destabilize the entire chamber, possibly the station itself. But leaving it intact meant these shadow entities would continue manifesting, spreading beyond the facility. "Can you shield us from the explosion?" Samus asked, already charging her plasma beam to maximum output. "Maybe, if you give me time to concentrate." The third sister planted her feet, raising both hands. An invisible barrier formed around them. Samus's sensors detected distortions in local spacetime, energy gathering from nowhere to create a protective shell. The shadows sensed their intention and attacked en masse. Dozens of tendrils lashed out, trying to pierce the force barrier, flowing around it like water around stone. The third sister gritted her teeth, sweat beading on her forehead as she maintained the shield against impossible pressure. Samus fired. The super plasma beam struck the Kyber crystal with enough energy to vaporize a gunship. The crystal absorbed the first shot, light flaring brilliantly, then cracked under the second shot. The third shot shattered it completely. The explosion was not fire or kinetic force. It was pure energy, reality itself fragmenting as the crystal's containment failed. Light and darkness collided in waves that rippled through dimensions Samus couldn't perceive, but her suit registered as catastrophic destabilization. The shadows screamed. She definitely heard it this time, a sound that bypassed audio sensors and struck directly at consciousness, and were torn apart, dragged back through the rift they'd emerged from. The third sister's force barrier held, barely. Energy washed over and around them, the station groaning as structural supports buckled. Alarms blared, automated systems announcing hull breaches and atmosphere loss in multiple sections. "Move!" the third sister gasped, her barrier collapsing. "The station's coming apart." They ran. Behind them, the research chamber imploded, walls buckling inward as the rift collapsed on itself. Corridors twisted, artificial gravity failing in sections, forcing them to use repulsor packs and Samus's grappling beam to navigate through chaos toward the docking bay. The shuttle appeared ahead, engines already warming. They'd programmed it for emergency launch if structural integrity dropped below critical thresholds. Smart planning that was about to save their lives. Samus grabbed the third sister and activated her speed booster, carrying both of them across the final corridor in a blur of motion. They crashed through the airlock just as the section depressurized, atmosphere howling into space. The shuttle's door sealed automatically, and the ship disengaged from the dying station. Through the viewport, they watched the research facility tear itself apart, sections breaking away, internal explosions blooming like deadly flowers, the whole structure collapsing into a debris field that would orbit Lebea's third planet for centuries. Both warriors were breathing hard, adrenaline still flooding their systems. The third sister looked at Samus with something approaching respect. "Your weapon, it shouldn't have worked against Force entities. Nothing physical should affect them." "Maybe I'm not as powerless as you thought," Samus replied, checking her suit's integrity. "Minor damage, energy reserves at 60%, all systems functional. And maybe the Force isn't the only power in this galaxy. That dimensional beam, what was it? Wave beam technology fires shots that exist partially in normal space and partially in parallel dimensions. The Chozo developed it for dealing with enemies that phase between realities." Samus paused. "Your galaxy might not have the Force in my reality, but we have our own impossibilities to deal with." The third sister was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "I was wrong about you. You're not just a soldier in fancy armor. You're—" She struggled for words. "You're something the galaxy hasn't seen before. Something that doesn't fit our categories." "I'm just trying to get home," Samus said. "Everything else is survival until that happens." "About that," the third sister pulled up a data file on her personal device. "While you were analyzing the station's structure, I accessed their research logs. Most were corrupted, but I found something. The Kyber crystal research was attempting to create dimensional rifts, controlled portals to what they called adjacent realities. The Empire wanted access to parallel universes for resource extraction." Samus's full attention locked on this information. They were researching dimensional travel? Unsuccessfully, obviously, but the theoretical framework is there. Equations, energy requirements, containment protocols. If someone could make it work. The third sister looked at her directly. "You could go home." It was the first real hope Samus had felt since crashing on Tatooine. Dimensional travel technology, even failed research, was more than she'd had access to before. With her understanding of similar Chozo systems and this galaxy's Kyber crystal principles, maybe she could develop a working transition drive. "I need those files," Samus said urgently. "They're encrypted with Imperial security protocols, but Lord Vader could decrypt them. He has clearance for all classified research." The third sister's expression became calculating. Of course that information would be leverage. He'd want something in exchange. "What?" "Continued service. You'd be valuable to him, too valuable to let leave. He'd hold that information hostage until you'd completed enough missions to make him trust your eventual departure. Or until he'd extracted every useful thing you know about your technology." Samus recognized the truth in this assessment. Vader was pragmatic, not generous. He'd used the promise of home as a leash, keeping her working for the Empire indefinitely. "Unless," the third sister continued slowly, "someone else accessed those files. Someone Vader trusts who could claim they were examining the research for completely different reasons. Someone who could copy the data without raising suspicion." "You," Samus said. "Me. I'm an Inquisitor. I have access to Imperial archives for hunting Force-sensitive targets. If I claimed I was researching dimensional rifts as potential hiding places for Jedi survivors, no one would question me copying those files." She met Samus's gaze. But why would I do that? Why would I help you escape this galaxy when you could be useful against the rebellion? It was a fair question, and Samus had a fair answer. Because you're not loyal to the Empire. You're loyal to yourself. And you know that if I owe you a favor, if you help me get home, then someday, if you need to disappear from Vader's service, I could help you do that. The third sister's expression confirmed Samus had hit the mark. Inquisitors serve through fear and ambition, but also through lack of alternatives. Anyone capable of interdimensional travel would be a valuable ally for someone planning an eventual escape from the Empire's grip. Interesting proposition, the third sister said carefully. But first, we survive this mission and report to Vader. Then we see about those files. Agreed? Agreed. They set course back to the Executor, the burning wreckage of the research station fading behind them. Samus felt the weight of possibility settling over her. A path home, hidden in failed Imperial research, guarded by a Sith Lord who collected dangerous people the way others collected art. But she'd navigated worse situations. She'd fought through Zebes' collapsing infrastructure, survived SR-388's extinction protocols, and destroyed Faz while it was actively trying to corrupt her. This was just another impossible challenge, and Samus Aran had never failed to overcome impossibility. In his meditation chamber aboard the Executor, Darth Vader felt the disturbance through the Force. The Kyber crystal's destruction, the dimensional rift's collapse, the two warriors who'd survived what should have killed them both. He smiled beneath his mask. The stranger from another galaxy was proving even more valuable than anticipated, and value in the Empire was everything. The debriefing lasted 3 hours. Vader listened without interruption as they described the shadow entities, the Kyber crystal rift, and the station's destruction. When they finished, he was silent for a full minute, his mechanical breathing the only sound in the chamber. You destroyed Imperial research worth billions of credits, he said finally. The research had already failed catastrophically, Samus replied. Leaving it intact would have allowed those entities to spread. Eventually, they would have manifested on other worlds. And you determined this how? Pattern recognition. I've dealt with dimensional breaches before. Once the barrier between realities is compromised, the breach expands exponentially unless the anchor point is destroyed. Your Kyber crystal was that anchor. Vader's helmet tilted slightly. You speak with certainty about phenomena this galaxy is only beginning to understand. Because my galaxy already understands them. We're not more advanced in every way, but in some areas, dimensional physics, energy containment, biotechnology, we're centuries ahead of you. It was a calculated statement designed to emphasize her value while also establishing expertise. Vader would respect competence more than deference. The third sister, Vader turned his attention to the Inquisitor. Your assessment? She was, the third sister hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what she was about to say. Effective, my lord. Her weapons damaged the entities when conventional blasters would have been useless. And her tactical judgment regarding the crystal's destruction was sound. High praise from someone who questioned her capabilities 3 days ago. The third sister's jaw tightened, but she didn't respond. Vader let the silence stretch, then dismissed her with a gesture. She bowed and left, shooting Samus a look that might have been grudging respect or suppressed anger. Possibly both. Alone with Vader again, Samus felt that invisible pressure return, the sensation of being examined by something beyond physical senses. You saved Imperial lives by preventing the breach from spreading, Vader said. For that, you have earned the promised compensation. 200,000 credits have been transferred to an account under your designation. Additionally, you now have access to Imperial technology databases, as agreed. And the research files from the station? The dimensional rift studies? Vader was very still. Those files are classified above your clearance level. They're also my best chance of repairing my ship's dimensional drive and returning home. Yes, they are. Vader turned to the viewport, looking out at the stars. Which presents an interesting dilemma. I have a skilled operative who could be extremely useful in future operations, but that operative wants nothing more than to leave my service and return to a galaxy I cannot reach. Why would I provide the means for my own loss? Samus had anticipated this conversation. because keeping me here against my will makes me unreliable. Eventually, I'll find another way home, or I'll die trying. Either outcome wastes your investment, but if you help me, I'll complete additional missions first. A fair exchange. My continued service for eventual freedom. How many missions? 3 more. High-value targets or critical operations. I complete them successfully, and you provide the dimensional research without restriction. Vader considered this. 5 missions, and one of them must be Han Solo's capture. 4 missions. Solo counts as 1. 4 missions, but I choose all of them. You don't refuse based on personal ethics or squeamishness about Imperial methods. That was the trap. Samus knew the Empire committed atrocities. She'd seen enough, even in her brief time here, to understand their brutality. Agreeing to unrestricted missions meant potentially participating in horrors she'd normally oppose. But she also knew that without those research files, she might never get home. The Chozo were gone. The Galactic Federation couldn't reach her. She was alone, and this was the only path forward. 4 missions, she agreed, but I maintain tactical autonomy. You set the objective, I determine the method. I won't commit atrocities, but I'll complete the task. Acceptable. Vader turned back to face her. Your first mission, which you've already accepted, remains Han Solo. The second mission I will assign when the time is appropriate. Complete both successfully and we'll discuss the remaining 2. It wasn't the deal Samus wanted, but it was the deal she could get. Understood. However, there is something else you should know. Vader accessed a holographic display showing a star chart of the galaxy. Your encounter on Tatooine has attracted attention beyond the Empire. Word spreads quickly in the underworld about a new hunter with unique capabilities. Several organizations have expressed interest in hiring you. Some are criminals, some are rebels. A marker appeared on the chart, Ord Mantell system. 3 days ago, Rebel Intelligence made contact with one of my double agents. They're offering 200,000 credits for someone to sabotage an Imperial supply depot on Geonosis. They specifically requested the armored hunter from Tatooine. They want you. Samus processed this information. The rebellion was trying to recruit her, which meant they saw her as potentially sympathetic to their cause. They weren't entirely wrong. She opposed authoritarian regimes instinctively, but working for them would make her an enemy of the Empire, and that would mean losing access to the dimensional research. I'm not interested in their offer, Samus said. I know, but they don't know that yet. Vader's breathing seemed to quicken with something like anticipation, which provides an opportunity. You accept their mission. You infiltrate their cell. You gather intelligence on their operations, leadership, and planned attacks. Then you complete their mission, but with modifications that serve Imperial interests. You want me to be a double agent. I want you to demonstrate that your capabilities extend beyond combat. The rebellion trusts outsiders who oppose the Empire. You're perfect for infiltration, no forced presence for their few surviving Jedi to detect. No Imperial records, no known allegiances. You could gather intelligence that would cripple their operations in this sector. It was cleverly designed. Vader was testing whether she'd engage in espionage, deception, and betrayal, all necessary skills for the kind of operative he wanted her to become. Refuse, and she'd demonstrate limited utility. Accept, and she'd prove she was willing to cross moral lines for her ultimate goal. The rebellion fights against tyranny, Samus said carefully. They're not my enemy. They're terrorists who kill Imperial citizens and disrupt order throughout the galaxy. But I'm not asking you to believe in the Empire's righteousness. I'm asking if you're willing to do distasteful work in exchange for what you want most. Samus had done distasteful work before. She'd worked with the Galactic Federation despite knowing their corruption. She'd made deals with space pirate defectors for intelligence. Survival often meant compromising ideals for practical necessities. But deliberately infiltrating and betraying people fighting for freedom felt different. It felt wrong in ways that transcended pragmatism. I'll consider it, she said finally. But that's not one of the 4 agreed missions. That's additional. Then consider it a test. Prove you can handle this kind of operation, and your subsequent missions may be more straightforward. Refuse, and I'll assign missions that test your loyalty more directly. perhaps involving targets you'd find morally objectionable. The threat was clear: cooperate with deception or be forced into worse. Vader was methodical in how he controlled people, always offering the lesser evil while holding greater evils in reserve. I need time to think about it. You have 3 days. After that, the rebellion's offer expires and they'll seek someone else. Choose wisely, Samisaran. Your path home depends on it. Samus left the meditation chamber feeling the walls of her situation closing in. Every choice led deeper into the Empire's operations. Every mission bound her more tightly to Vader's service. But without his help, she'd never repair her ship. The third sister was waiting in the corridor outside, leaning against the wall with studied casualness. How bad was it? He wants me to infiltrate the rebellion. The Inquisitor's eyebrows rose. Interesting. That's usually my kind of work. He must be impressed with you to trust you with espionage so quickly. Or he's testing whether I'll refuse. Finding my limits. Probably both. Vader does nothing for single reasons. The third sister pushed off the wall. For what it's worth, I've been thinking about our conversation, the research files. I accessed the archives this morning, claimed I was investigating dimensional phenomena as potential Jedi hiding spots. Downloaded everything related to the Libya station's work. Samus felt a surge of hope. You have them? Encrypted, but yes. Vader hasn't noticed the access yet. It'll take a few days for the logs to be reviewed, and by then it'll look like routine research. She produced a data chip. This contains everything: theoretical frameworks, failed experiments, energy calculations. Probably enough for someone with your expertise to reconstruct a working dimensional drive. Why are you doing this? Samus asked, suspicious of the sudden generosity. Because I've been serving Vader for 6 years. 6 years of hunting terrified Force sensitives, executing prisoners, doing the Empire's dirty work while he watches and judges. I'm tired, Aaron. Tired of fear, tired of the mask I wear, tired of pretending I believe in Imperial order. Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. If you manage to leave this galaxy, you'll prove it's possible. And someday, when I finally have the courage, maybe you'll tell me how you did it. It was the most honest thing the third sister had said since they met. Behind the Inquisitor's armor of arrogance and cruelty was someone trapped, looking for hope of escape. Samus took the data chip. If I make it home, I'll find a way to send information back. Instructions for building a dimensional transit device. It won't be easy. You'll need resources the Empire controls, but it'll be possible. That's all I ask, a possibility. The third sister smiled, and for the first time it looked genuine. Good hunting, Aaron. And whatever you decide about the rebellion, remember that the Empire turns everyone it touches into weapons. Don't let it turn you into something you'll hate. She walked away, leaving Samus alone with the data chip and the weight of impossible decisions. 3 days to choose: infiltrate the rebellion and betray people fighting for freedom, or refuse and face whatever worst mission Vader would assign. Both paths led through moral compromise. Both required becoming something she'd promised herself she'd never be. But the data chip in her hand represented hope. Real, tangible hope of going home, of seeing her own galaxy again, of completing the mission she'd abandoned when the dimensional rift pulled her here. Samus returned to her quarters, Spartan accommodations the Empire had provided, and connected the data chip to her suit's computer systems. Files unspooled across her HUD, complex equations, energy matrices, containment field specifications. The Empire had been close to breakthrough before the research went catastrophic, closer than they realized. With her understanding of Chozo dimensional technology and these specifications, she could potentially build a working drive within months, maybe weeks if she had the right materials. All she needed was time, resources, and the Empire's continued cooperation. All she needed was to compromise everything she believed in. Samus sat in the darkness of her quarters, surrounded by holographic equations that described tearing holes in reality, and made her decision. She would infiltrate the rebellion. Not for the Empire and not for Vader's approval, but because every mission completed was one step closer to home. Because survival sometimes required becoming the monster temporarily to prevent becoming one permanently. The Chozo had taught her many things. They taught her to fight, to hunt, to survive against impossible odds. But they'd also taught her that the strongest warrior was the one who could make hard choices without losing themselves in the process. She would walk this path. She would do what was necessary, but she wouldn't let it change who she was. Samus Aran accessed her communication system and sent a single message to Vader. I accept the rebellion infiltration. Provide contact protocols and mission parameters. The response came within seconds. Excellent. Arrangements are being made. Your legend begins now. Bounty Hunter. In the depths of space, on a modified blockade runner hidden among asteroid fields, a rebel intelligence officer received confirmation that the mysterious armored hunter had agreed to meet. She smiled, imagining how this powerful new operative would turn the tide against the Empire. She had no idea she was inviting a Viper into her nest, and that Viper was hating every second of the role she'd accepted. The meeting point was a cantina on Dantooine, far from Imperial patrols and buried in the agricultural heartland where the rebellion once maintained a base. Samus arrived alone, her gunship finally repaired enough for short-range flights using materials Vader had provided. The ship sat in a field 2 kilometers out, cloaked and waiting. Inside the cantina, she drew the usual stares. Her armor was impossible to miss, impossible to ignore. She'd become a legend in certain circles. The armored hunter who'd fought stormtroopers and survived, who'd worked for Jabba and walked away, whose origins were mystery wrapped in speculation. The rebel contact was a human woman, mid-30s, wearing the practical clothing of a farmer, but carrying herself with military precision. She sat in a corner booth, nursing a drink and watching Samus approach with careful evaluation. You're the hunter from Tatooine, the woman said as Samus sat down. Not a question. And you're rebellion. Let's skip the pleasantries. The woman smiled slightly. Direct. I appreciate that. My name is Captain Lyra Voss. I coordinate intelligence operations for this sector. We've been watching you since your arrival. There aren't many people who can fight Imperial troops to a standstill and walk away. What do you want? Straight to business. Good. Voss pulled out a data pad, checking that nearby tables were empty before continuing. The Empire has a supply depot on Geonosis. Weapons, armor, vehicle parts, everything they need to equip garrison forces across the Outer Rim. If that depot were destroyed, it would cripple Imperial operations for months, set them back significantly in this sector. And you want me to destroy it? We want someone who can infiltrate without triggering alarms, disable security systems we can't hack, and extract before Imperial reinforcements arrive. Your armor suggests advanced technology. Your reputation suggests competence. That's exactly what we need. Samus studied the woman through her visor. Voss was earnest, dedicated, genuinely believing she was recruiting an ally against tyranny. It made what Samus was doing feel even worse. Payment? 200,000 credits, plus whatever you can salvage from the depot before destroying it. Imperial weapons fetch good prices on the black market. It was a fair offer. More importantly, it was real. Voss wasn't lying about the mission or the compensation. The rebellion was operating in good faith, which made Samus's betrayal more reprehensible. What's the real reason you're recruiting me? Samus asked. You have operatives. Why an unknown outsider? Voss hesitated, then decided on honesty. Because we're desperate. The Empire has crushed 3 of our cells in the last month. We've lost good people, and the survivors are stretched too thin. When word reached us about an armored warrior with no Imperial ties, no force sensitivity, no connection to any known faction, you represented hope. Someone who might help us because it's the right thing to do, not because they have some political agenda. The words hit harder than Samus expected. They thought she represented hope. They thought she was choosing to help because she opposed tyranny. They were wrong on both counts. I'll do it, Samus said, hating herself. Provide coordinates and security details. Voss's relief was visible. Thank you, truly. The galaxy needs more people willing to stand against the Empire's brutality. She transferred files to Samus's suit computer. Everything we know about the depot is here. We estimate you'll need 3 days to plan and execute. Contact us when it's done. As Samus stood to leave, Voss added quietly, We're trying to build something better, a galaxy where people aren't afraid of their own government, where freedom matters more than order. I know you're a bounty hunter. This isn't your fight, but if you ever decide it should be, we'd be honored to have you. Samus walked out of the cantina without responding, the weight of Voss's words pressing down like physical mass. Outside, Dantooine's grasslands stretched under a clean sky, wind carrying the scent of growing things. It was beautiful, peaceful, everything a war-torn galaxy needed more of. And she was about to betray people fighting to protect that beauty. Back in her gunship, Samus accessed the files Voss had provided. The depot layout, security rotations, shield frequencies, everything the rebellion had gathered through careful intelligence work. She cross-referenced it with Imperial data Vader had secretly provided, confirming the rebels' information was accurate, but incomplete. They didn't know about the reinforced vault in the depot's center, where prototype weapons were stored for field testing. Vader wanted those prototypes. His instructions were clear. Destroy the depot as the rebels requested, but extract the prototypes first. The rebellion would celebrate a successful sabotage while the Empire lost only standard equipment. Vader would gain advanced weapons, and Samus would prove her reliability. Everyone would believe they'd won, except the people who actually had. She spent 2 days planning. The depot was heavily guarded, but not impenetrable. Her cloaking technology would bypass visual detection. Her scan visor would map patrol routes and identify vulnerabilities. With the wave beam, she could disable shield generators from outside their protective fields. It was actually a straightforward operation by her standards. The moral complexity was what made it difficult. On the third day, she flew to Geonosis, a desert world of rust-colored rock formations and ancient droid foundries. The Imperial depot sat in a canyon, surrounded by guard towers and energy barriers. At night, under Geonosis's moons, Samus dropped from her gunship 3 kilometers out and approached on foot. The infiltration was textbook perfect. She ghosted past patrols, her cloaked form invisible to sensors and eyes alike. She bypassed security checkpoints using careful timing and knowledge of blind spots. Within an hour, she'd reached the central vault. The prototypes were exactly where Vader said they'd be. Experimental blaster rifles with enhanced range, portable shield generators, and something called a Dark Trooper armor prototype. All valuable. All technology the rebellion would never see. Samus loaded them into a storage container she'd brought, sealed it, and transmitted coordinates for Imperial retrieval. Done. She'd completed Vader's objective. Now came the part the rebels expected. She set charges throughout the depot, plasma explosives from her gunship's arsenal, powerful enough to level the entire facility. Then she disabled the shield generators, opened the defensive perimeters, and activated the timer, 15 minutes. But as she prepared to extract, something stopped her. In a side room, she found prisoners, 6 of them wearing rebel insignia, locked in detention cells and scheduled for transfer to an Imperial interrogation center. They looked up as she appeared, confusion mixing with hope on their faces. "Who are you?" one asked, a young man with lieutenant's bars. Samus stood there, invisible to them through her cloak, facing a decision that would define what she was becoming. Vader's mission didn't include the prisoners. Extracting them would complicate everything, might even compromise her cover. The logical choice was to leave them. They'd die in the explosion she'd set, unfortunate casualties of war. But they were also people. People who'd been fighting for something they believed in, now about to die because of her actions. Samus deactivated her cloak, materializing before them. "I'm getting you out." She melted through the cell doors with her plasma beam, her armor's strength tearing metal like paper. The prisoners stared at her in shock as she worked. "Rebel extraction?" the lieutenant asked hopefully. "Something like that. Move fast. This place explodes in 12 minutes. They ran. Samus led them through corridors now abandoned as her sabotage triggered evacuation protocols. Alarms blared, stormtroopers rushed toward their posts, chaos spreading through the depot as systems failed. Outside, the prisoners scattered into the canyon, having memorized escape routes in case of rescue. Samus watched them go, then activated her speed booster and left the area in a blur of motion. Behind her, the depot detonated, a massive explosion that lit up Geonosis's night sky and sent a mushroom cloud rising into the darkness. The mission was complete. The depot was destroyed. The prototypes were extracted, and 6 rebels who should have died were alive. Samus sat in her gunship, looking at the burning remains of the depot, and contacted Vader. Mission accomplished, she reported. Depot destroyed. Prototypes extracted. Imperial casualties minimal due to successful evacuation protocols. And the prisoners? Vader's voice came through with that characteristic mechanical breathing. So he knew. Of course he knew. He probably had surveillance on the entire operation. What prisoners? Samus asked carefully. Silence. Then, you retrieved 6 rebel prisoners from the detention block and released them during the evacuation chaos. This was not part of your mission parameters. They weren't part of the sabotage target. Leaving them would have been unnecessary casualties. More silence. Samus waited for the consequences, for Vader's anger at her deviation from orders. Instead, he laughed, a sound more terrifying than his rage would have been. Interesting. You complete the betrayal successfully, but cannot help showing mercy to your victims. This tells me much about your character, bounty hunter. Are we done here? For now, Captain Voss will contact you within hours to celebrate your success and provide payment. Play the role convincingly. Make them trust you completely, because your next mission will require that trust. What's the next mission? Patience. First, establish yourself as their ally. Then we'll discuss how best to use that position. Vader paused. And Samus Aran, your compassion for the prisoners was acceptable. It maintains your cover as someone with principles. But do not mistake my tolerance for weakness. If your sentimentality compromises Imperial objectives, there will be consequences. The transmission ended. Samus sat alone, mission accomplished and soul diminished, wondering how many more compromises she'd have to make before earning her way home. 3 hours later, Captain Voss contacted her with barely contained excitement. The depot is destroyed. The Empire just lost millions of credits and supplies. You did it. I completed the job, Samus replied, keeping her voice neutral. More than that, 6 of our people who were captured last week just made contact. They escaped during the chaos you created. You saved them without even knowing they were there. Voss's voice cracked slightly. That's everything we fight for. Saving lives while striking at tyranny. The irony was crushing. They were celebrating her as a hero while she'd stolen their victory and delivered weapons to their enemies. Payment will be transferred immediately, Voss continued. And Samus, the Alliance leadership wants to meet you. If you're interested in more work, more meaningful work, we could use someone like you, someone who fights for what's right. I'll think about it, Samus said, ending the transmission before Voss could hear the self-loathing in her voice. She set course away from Geonosis, her gunship cutting through space toward coordinates Vader would provide for the next mission. Behind her, the rebellion celebrated a victory that was actually a defeat. Ahead of her, the Empire tightened its grip on a weapon it believed it could control. And caught between them, Samus Aran carried the weight of knowing she'd become exactly what she'd sworn never to be, a tool for oppression, a betrayer of hope, a hunter who'd sold her principles for a path home. The dimensional research data waited in her ship's computers, promising escape from this moral nightmare. But looking at those equations now felt like looking at blood money, valuable, necessary, and utterly corrupting. She thought of the Chozo who'd raised her, trained her, given her the armor and weapons that made her what she was. They'd taught her to be strong, to survive, to overcome any obstacle. But they'd also taught her honor, sacrifice, and the importance of fighting for those who couldn't fight for themselves. She was failing them. Every mission, every compromise, every act of betrayal eroded the foundation they'd built in her. But what choice did she have? Stay trapped in this galaxy forever, or do terrible things for a chance to leave? Samus stared out at the unfamiliar stars and made herself a promise. 4 missions, 4 more compromises. Then she'd take the dimensional research, repair her ship, and leave this galaxy behind forever. Let the Empire and Rebellion fight their war without her. Let Vader find another weapon. Let the third sister find another path to freedom. She would survive this. She would get home. And she would never, ever let herself be used like this again. But deep down in the part of herself she was trying to ignore, Samus knew the truth. Every compromise made the next one easier. Every betrayal normalized the next betrayal. By the time she earned her freedom, there might not be enough of the real Samus Aran left to go home to. The galaxy far, far away had many horrors, but perhaps none more terrible than what it could turn good people into when they were desperate enough to escape it. Samus Aran had come to the Star Wars galaxy as a hunter, pursuing prey through a dimensional anomaly. She'd crashed alone, stranded, with nothing but her armor and her determination to survive. In the weeks since, she'd navigated the criminal underworld, faced the Empire's might, encountered the Force's mysteries, and made deals she'd never imagined making. The dimensional research data now resided in her ship's computers, a path home, purchased with compromises and betrayals. 4 missions stood between her and freedom. 1 already completed, 3 more waiting in the shadows of Vader's plans. Each would test her capabilities, challenge her principles, and force her deeper into this galaxy's conflicts. But Samus was nothing if not adaptable. She'd survived the destruction of Zebes, the horrors of SR-388, and the corruption of Faz. She would survive this too, would complete her obligations and escape back to her own reality. The Empire thought it had acquired a powerful weapon. The Rebellion thought it had gained a principled ally. Both were right and both were wrong. She was neither weapon nor ally. She was a warrior far from home, doing what was necessary to return. Whether that made her hero or villain depended on perspective. And in a galaxy at war, perspective was everything. Above her gunship, unfamiliar constellations wheeled through the void. Somewhere among those alien stars, Han Solo was running from debts and destiny. Somewhere, the Rebellion was planning their next strike against tyranny. Somewhere, Darth Vader was orchestrating plans within plans, using people like chess pieces in games they didn't understand. And somewhere, in a laboratory she couldn't yet imagine, technology was being developed that would eventually tear holes between universes. Technology that would either save her or destroy everything she'd sacrificed to protect. The hunter's journey through the Star Wars galaxy had only just begun, but one thing was certain. Whether as legend, nightmare, or simply another mercenary in an endless war, Samus Aran's presence would be remembered. The galaxy far, far away had encountered something it had no framework to understand. A warrior from beyond its boundaries, operating by rules it didn't recognize, pursuing goals it couldn't comprehend. And in the end, that might be the most dangerous thing of all.